What's up guys? Stick around because today I'm going to be teaching you how to properly pack a wound in a junctional area. Welcome back guys, Damon with Triarm Defense, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to properly pack wounds in junctional areas. So wound packing is a very simple skill to learn. When it comes to wound packing, it's usually meant for first line defense or protection against some sort of hemorrhage or stop the bleed situation when it comes to penetrating injuries. There's usually three main ways to stop the bleed in a hemorrhage control situation, and there's tourniquet use, which we talked about in a previous video. There's wound packing with gauze, and there's also pressure dressings like Israeli bandages or just regular pressure dressing. And there is points when you need to think about using those three different items in three different situations. Tourniquets are meant for limb hemorrhage control, meaning our legs and our arms. If there's something going on in our core or a junctional area like our armpits, our groin, or our neck, we can't put a tourniquet there. So what do we have to do? We have to think about what else can we use? Well, we can't put a pressure dressing around the neck, right? And it's probably pretty hard to put a pressure dressing in the armpits or groin, hip area. So now we need to look at plugging that wound up. And that means putting some kind of hemostatic gauze or a quick clot or something in that wound and applying pressure with our hands or something else to stop the bleeding. Now there are different types of tools that we can use to wound pack an injury, such as a gunshot wound, maybe a major deep cut with a stab wound, or something of the nature. Our main item that we want to try to use if we have the financial ability or we're able to afford it is something like quick clot combat gauze. And that is because these types of tools are impregnated with a quick clotting agent that helps the clotting factor and improves the chances of that wound and that blood becoming coagulated, helping to stop the bleed. But you do not have to use something like that. If that is not at your disposal, or maybe you couldn't afford it at that time, then going and buying a $2 to $3 regular Z-fold gauze off of Amazon or something is also perfectly acceptable. And also using the patient's shirt or your shirt is also acceptable. The main point is to plug that wound up and apply pressure inside of that wound to stop the bleeding. And like I said, if we have the option to use something that's impregnated with a clotting agent, then that's what we want to use. Now, people may not like that answer because, well, what about infection? If you're so worried about infection, then you're never going to be able to treat the patient like they need to be treated. Yes, infection is a concern, but at the end of the day, if I drop part of my rolled gauze on the ground and it becomes contaminated when I'm trying to plug a wound of somebody that's been shot in the leg or shot in the stomach or whatever the case may be, at that point, I'm not worried about infection. I'm worried about plugging the wound and stopping the bleeding from continuing, because if they continue to bleed out, the infection won't matter because they're going to die. But the point is, they're not dead because I was able to stop the hemorrhage. We can always treat the infection after the fact. We need to focus on treating the injury. So today what I'm going to be using to show you how to do this is I'm using a simple trainer. It's a combat gauze trainer. All right, it's not impregnated with any kind of hemostatic agent. It's just simple gauze that you can use for training. Now again, you don't want to use this in a real life situation. Can it be used in a real life situation? Yes, because it's still gauze, right? I can still pack that wound and apply pressure inside of that wound to help stop the bleeding and hopefully help that blood start to coagulate. But the ideal situation is you don't want to use a trainer. You want to go get regular gauze or some kind of combat gauze with a clotting agent. And I'm also going to be using my handy dandy stop the bleed tool. Like I said, it's just a yoga block with a gunshot wound, which is the one we're going to be going over today. It's a gunshot wound in the yoga block, and I'm going to be showing you how to pack that wound. Now, keep in mind, this is a little different than obviously a human body. It's going to be a little more stiff as far as shoving that gauze into that wound, as it would be if I was, shoving my finger into the...
Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Some things are better left unsaid. Don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. Please keep that thought inside your head.
Somebody's leg or arm or hip crease or elbow or armpit. But honestly, if I practice on this and it's super stiff like this yoga block is going to be, if I go to actually use it on a person, it's going to feel a lot easier because it's a lot more stretchy. Now normally when I teach this, I have a partner with me that has a tube that goes into the side right here in this hole, and they're squeezing water or some kind of fluid that's coming up through this hole, and I can show me actually applying pressure inside and show that properly packed, it's going to stop that fluid from coming through. But you're just going to have to trust me on this one. So basically Usually the first thing I'm gonna do is if I have some sort of medical gear with me and I have some sort of access to some kind of latex-free gloves or something like that, then I wanna put that on because I wanna keep myself from coming in contact with bloodborne pathogens or in contact with their blood, because I don't know what they have as far as infections may be concerned. So you always wanna think safety first, but if you're trying to save somebody's life, try to save their life. First thing I want to do is I want to do a full head to toe assessment to find out where that bleeding is coming from. And say it was just an active shooter situation, and more than likely I'm looking for some sort of bullet hole or bullet wound. And it just so happens that the bullet wound wasn't in the chest or anything, so I don't need any kind of chest seal or anything like that. Wasn't in the arm or their leg, wasn't hitting an artery, so I don't need to think about applying the tourniquet to that limb. It just so happens that this person gets shot in a junctional area that I can't put a pressure dressing and I can't put a tourniquet, so I need to pack it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull out my combat gauze because that's what I have. And when I tear it open, all of these types of gauze are usually gonna come Z-folded. And that means they're gonna come out relatively easy from the package. Now this one has been used in previous trains, so it's already open and I kind of Z-folded it back, so it's not gonna be the same as a brand new package. But the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tear it open. Once I tear it open, there's a couple different ways that you can try to keep this gauze from touching the ground. I can either keep it in the package and pull it out from the strand and let it unfold from the package. I can try to put this on top of the person as I'm pulling it out, or I can just hold on to it and pull it out as I start to stuff. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it all out of the package so I can find the end here. Now I have the end of the gauze. So now I'm gonna keep this gauze in my hand, and as I go to stuff, I'm just gonna hold it with the back two fingers right here so I can keep good traction with it. Now you have to keep in mind, this is probably not gonna feel great for the person that's been shot. They may scream, they may yell, they may cuss at you, they may try to stop it, but you have to be the person that's calm, the one that knows what they're doing, and you have to explain to this victim that this needs to be done to save your life. And if it's bad enough that you need somebody to help you hold that person down so you can pack this wound, then grab a bystander or somebody that can help you hold this person down so you can pack their wound and potentially save their life. So the way I like to do this is when I start packing this wound, I'm not shoving the whole pack of gauze into the wound at once. I'm taking the single strand as I'm pulling it out, and I'm putting it on the tip of my thumb, and I'm going to start by kind of curling it up, and I'm going to shove it deep into that wound. And I'm not just shoving it into the wound, I'm applying pressure to the side and the bottom. And as I come out, I'm trying to keep as much pressure as possible in that wound without relieving too much as I put my next piece of gauze in there. So I'm just gonna either wrap my thumb with the gauze, or I'm just gonna take the gauze in my thumb right here, and I'm just gonna continue to shove into that wound as I pull this finger out, and I'm continuing to apply pressure. Now here's where you come into an issue. If you're not holding the gauze right, it can get in the way of you grabbing more gauze to put in there. So if you have to, like I said, don't worry about it laying on the person or possibly flying off onto the ground. Put it on that person to where you have access to all that gauze, and I'm gonna pretend that this is his lower half and this is where he's shot, and I'm just gonna put this on the person. So now I'm gonna continue to shove that gauze, grab some, put it in there, continue and apply pressure until I run out of gauze, or until I've created enough pressure to the point it's fully packed. It's getting hard to put more gauze in there. That means I have an adequate amount of pressure in there, and I'm stopping the bleeding as much as possible. So I'm gonna continue to do that. Now I'm at a good point to where I can start to apply overpressure. Now it may be beneficial for you to have more than one pack of gauze on your person. And that's because if I run out of gauze when I'm trying to pack this wound, which is also very likely, I may need a secondary pack of gauze to continue shoving in here and applying more pressure. But for this situation, I still have a little bit of the gauze left. So what I'm gonna do is once this hole is packed as much as I possibly can, I'm gonna continue to apply pressure with my thumb as I grab whatever gauze I have left, and I'm going to just lay that on top of the wound, and I'm going to apply very hard, very direct pressure for about 2 to 3 minutes, preferably 3 minutes, to continue try to stop that blood loss and continue to help that clotting system. Now, if I did run out of gauze and the hole is still packed enough to where I'm content with it, then, and I don't have any more gauze to lay on top of it, I can always use a shirt or something else, or if there's nothing else I can put on top of it, I can always just continue to apply pressure with my hand without anything on top of it. But it's ideal to have something else that can help stop some of that bleeding, and go ahead and continue to apply that pressure for about 2 to 3 minutes. Now, hopefully with me applying this pressure for about 2 to 3 minutes with all the packing that I've already done, hopefully that was enough to stop the bleeding, or stop the bleeding long enough for them to get definitive care at a hospital with an ambulance. And that's really all there is to it, guys, as far as wound packing goes. Being able to continuously apply pressure as we're stuffing that gauze or that garment or that combat gauze into that wound to stop that bleeding and keeping constant pressure on the walls inside that cavity. You can wound pack other areas like the arms, like the legs. You can wound pack those areas. Usually that's one of the first things you want to do. If you don't see squirting blood, that tells you obviously you need a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. If you just see venous or capillary kind of blood flow, then you can go ahead and pack that wound and see if it stops the bleeding. Now, if you've packed the wound on the leg or the arm or whatever, and you haven't been able to stop the bleeding, it's still flowing blood pretty good through that wound packing, then that's when you want to go ahead and apply a tourniquet if it's on the leg or the upper extremities. But just because maybe you get a bullet wound in the arm or the leg, that doesn't mean you can't pack it. Go ahead and try and pack it if you don't see squirting blood, and if you can't stop the bleeding with wound packing, then go ahead and apply a tourniquet. The thing you want to take out of this the most is, remember, pressure, pressure, pressure. You need constant pressure to stop the bleeding. Now, it doesn't take much for you just to go online to Amazon, buy yourself a training combat gauze packet, buy yourself a yoga block, cut a big hole in it, and practice this at home. I hope you guys found this useful, and I hope you guys got something out of it. Now go out and get your own training tools, put this training to practice, come to our courses, learn how to do this stuff live from me in person. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell notification button so you're not missing any of our videos. And I'll see you next time when we're talking about pressure dressings. Stay prepared, stay safe.